first of all, just let me start the recording because if not, we're gonna have problems then. Okay. First of all, let me apologize because I had some problems with my electricity supplies the last class, and I wasn't able to be here, so sorry for that. Okay, but it was not my fault. I mean, on Tuesday I had this problem, and I couldn't solve it. Neither my neighbors, my neighbors, and anyone else. So sorry for that. I had those problems, and I couldn't give the class. Sorry. Okay, but let's try to make up with today's sessions the topics that we didn't have time to review that class. Okay, today we have our last session of the course, is session 6, and we're going to review the topics for week 6. Okay, let's go here. Okay, today's program, as always, we're going to talk about the goal of the class. And as you already know, the goal is not a specific goal, but specifically to review the topics that you had reviewed in the previous or in the last fourth units of the Cambridge platform. Then we're going to talk about last week topics, the things that we saw in the last week. Where we are going also have a practical activity, which in this case is only reviewing the vocabulary and the grammar section of the last fourth units. Then we're going to have a space for doubts. We're going to talk about next week activities, which in this case is just the last activities of the course. We're going to have a summing up and then a space for doubts. Okay, so let's start. Our goal is that we will make a general review of the main topics seen in units 9, 10, 11, and 12. Also, as you already know, for today's class, the main idea it was to review units 9 and unit 9 and unit 10. But as we are not going to have any other class next week, we're going to have only the review session, which I need to talk about. Remember that today is our last class. So next week, we're not going to have any class. We're going to have a specific classroom to talk about any problems in relation with your scores or with anything you have doubts about with your final grades. Okay, so it is well, it is not probable, but probably we're going to have our last our review session on Thursday at 6 or 7 p.m. I'm not sure right now, but it's going to be on Thursday. So be careful with that. Just be, I don't know, just be aware that on Monday I will post the specific date for the meeting. Okay, so just for you to know and be careful with that. So we don't have any other session, so that's why in this occasion we need to review 4 units 9, 10, 11, and 12. Let's go with this. Okay, last week we were talking about, again as usually, vocabulary and grammar. In vocabulary section, we talk about urban problems or vocabulary related with urban problems, or specifically with situations in a city. You also learn adverbs of manner, how to construct or how to structure adverbs of manner, and some basic adverbs of manner. Also, you reviewed some music, TV shows, and movies vocabulary, which I think it was a very important section. Probably not a new section or a new or very new vocabulary, but just an important section to remember all this vocabulary. Then you learn some words for describing experiences and for describing progress. In this moment, I don't remember exactly the words that you worked on, but these were the main vocabulary issues you worked on last week. Then In the grammar section, you learn how to use quantifiers. As I told you before, I think this was a very important grammar topic. But the special or the specific topic that I told you to take care on was the zero and the first conditional. I don't remember the name of these conditionals in the platform, but I told you that the formal name of those conditionals was zero and first conditional. The first one for facts and just facts, scientific things, logical deductions, and probably well, yes, the main meaning of the zero conditional. Then first conditional is for real possibilities in the future, and we talk about the combination of the verbs in these conditional sentences. Zero conditional, present plus present, first conditional, present plus future. And I told you that this was a very important topic because it's probably the most difficult one in the intermediate level to manage conditionals. And then you learn how to use the used to structure to talk about habits in the past. You also learn how to make comparisons with the particle as. And then also you reviewed the present perfect structure and the present perfect continuous structure. And I think, again, this was a very important topic because you reviewed again the difference between the simple tenses and the continuous tenses, okay? And this is very important for us because, as I told you in that class, you really need to be aware of the three ways in which we can talk about verbs. First of all, the simple tenses, which are simple past, simple present, simple future, past perfect, present perfect, and future perfect. Then the continuous tenses, present continuous, past continuous, future continuous, past perfect continuous, present perfect continuous, and future perfect continuous. And then you need to, for today's class, it's important for us to remember the passive voice forms of the verbs. Okay, because in unit, I don't remember right now the number. We will see that in a minute. But in the units for today's class, you start to work with a passive voice. Okay, so I think these were the main topics, grammar topics, in which you had to pay attention in the previous class. Conditionals, zero and first conditional, and then the tenses of the verbs. Let's go with the units for this week. Okay, this week activities you worked on, or you will work on unit 9, unit 10, unit 11, and unit 12. Okay, let's start with unit 9. Unit 9 was structured in 2 lessons. The first one, which is building a future, and then the second one, which is house rules. In the first lesson, you learn a vocabulary about college subjects, which I think are kind of easy things to do because it is probable that for now you already know a lot of this vocabulary. Sorry, I had something to. Okay, yes, you have a lot of this vocabulary in your mind, so I don't think you have problems with this. Specifically for this unit, I think the most important subjects or topics was modals again. Okay, as I told you in previous sessions, this is a very important grammatical topic. So I really want you to pay attention in these sections. Modals of necessity in the first one: have to, need to, and must. An important distinctions between a must and have to and need to, because as I told you before, modals are complicated. I'm going to share with you another PDF with all the modals of the modal meanings and also all the the ways in which you can structure models. It's a very complicated topic because as I tell to many students, you don't only need to pay attention in the meaning of the model, but also in other factors. For example, the degree in which the model is functioning. For example, if the model is stronger than other model. In this case, for example, for must, the difference between must and have to can also be described in terms of degree. Must is stronger than have to, for example, in terms of necessity. Usually, must means an obligation to do something, and have to means not an obligation, but a possibility to do something. But in this case, for example, it is possible that you don't have to do the thing that you have in mind, but that you want to. Okay, but must usually we use must in obligation context. Mhm. In the second lesson, you work with employment vocabulary and again models of prohibition and permission. And if I'm not wrong, in this case you worked with can, could, and may. Again, a very specific topic because as you saw in the lessons, in this case in the lesson 2, some models are, we can divide models in terms of, for example, in this lesson, when do we use can and could in questions or affirmative sentences? Or, for example, can we use may or could to answer for a permission, for example, to answer for a permission question? So we have difference between them when we can use some of the models and when we are not allowed to use those models. Can, may, and could. We're gonna try to work with that in the document. Okay, so you have to be very careful with models. In this case, I think the most important thing in this unit is models. To pay attention in the grammatical structure for models of necessity and models of prohibition and permission. In the unit 10, we have 3 lessons, okay? Lesson 1, lesson 2, and lesson 4. Lesson 1 was called clothes. And in this case, you learn vocabulary to talk about describing material, or to talk about materials, okay? So we learn words to describe materials. And in this case, in this unit, I think the most important thing, again, is not about vocabulary, but about grammar. Because in this case, you started to use a passive voice. In the first lesson, you learn how to structure the simple present passive voice. And in the second lesson, you learn how to structure the simple past passive voice. As I told you before, you need to remember that all the tenses, the simple tenses, have a continuous form, and also all the simple tenses have a passive voice. Also, all the continuous tenses have a passive voice, okay? So first of all, we need to understand that we have simple tenses and continuous tenses. And all of them, simple tenses and continuous tenses, have passive voice. Okay, so in this case, we started with simple present and simple past. And then in the lesson 2, global or local, you learned some vocabulary for production and distribution in the market, in the global market, in the global commerce. So you learn words as export, import, distribution, and manufacture, all those kind of words. And in lesson 4, not just customers, fans, you learn some strategies for the listening skill and for the writing skill. In the listening part, you learn again, you review how to identify the gist of a listening, and also how to identify speakers. Also, how to understand contrastive stress. This is a very important factor. For example, in some words, in this case, I remember export and import. You need to be careful because export or export are different. If we pronounce the word as export, or if we pronounce the word as export, we have not only a difference, well, probably meaning is almost the same, but in terms of grammatical category, one of the words is a noun, and the other word is a verb. Mhm. So you have to be careful with contrastive stress. And then in the writing section you learn how to use however and although to contrast ideas. However and although are similar to the most simple conjunction, which is but, are not the same, but they have a similar meaning. Okay, but however, although are more advanced conjunctions in this case, and also in this case we are talking about subordinating conjunctions. So I think this is a very important topic for you to be aware of, because in this case you started to learn some advanced words to connect ideas inside a text. Okay, so in unit 10, I think the most important thing to pay attention on is the passive voice. In this case, simple present and simple past passive voice. Then in Unit 11, we have again two lessons. Lesson 1, which is Secret of Success, and Lesson 2, which is Now That's Interesting. In the first one, we learned some words to talk about succeed, or succeeding in this case. And in the second, vocabulary was about opportunities and skills. But again, in this unit, I think the most important thing is not about vocabulary, but about grammar. As you can see right now, I think for all the units for this week, the most important thing is not about vocabulary, but about grammar. Modals, in this case, passive voice in the unit 10, and in the unit 11 two grammar topics. Phrasal verbs, which is a very important topic, not only because of the vocabulary, because if you remember, in this case, in the vocabulary section, you learned some phrasal verbs, but the structure of the phrasal verbs, how to use them with an object, for example. And if you have not an object or a specific object, if you have pronouns that refer to an object, in what position do we need to place, and in what position we need to place the object in relation with the phrasal verb. I think this is a very important issue that you need to pay attention on, because it's very important for us to start working with phrasal verbs in the correct way. And then in the lesson 2, again, a very important topic for intermediate English level: present and future unreal conditionals. As I told you before, in the previous units, you learn how to use zero and first conditional. In this case, you are learning how to use or how to create the second and third conditional, which are for present and real situations and for future and real situations. So I think this is a very important topic. Again, sorry. In this case, I think you were working only with the second conditional. It is not the combinations of the verbs is simple past and present conditionals, or what we can call present conditional, because in reality this is would, or the modal would, could. If I'm not wrong, we can use would or could, and then the simple form of the verb. I would like to be something, for example. So phrasal verbs and present and future and real conditionals are, I think, they are the most important topics of Unit 11. And then if we go to Unit 12, we have here, three lessons: Lesson 1, Lesson 2, and Lesson 4. The first one is called It Was an Accident. The second one is called Learning Underwater. And the fourth one, which is in reality the third one, is Lessons Learned. In the first one, you learn how to use or words about accidents, how to describe an accident. Then in the grammatical section, you learn how to use indefinite pronouns. In this case, again, well, I think in this case, vocabulary here for the phrasal verbs, an important section, vocabulary and how to use phrasal verbs in this case. In this case, also, again, grammatical issues. Indefinite pronouns, it's a very important topic in English. You work with some, any, and none, if I'm not wrong. We're going to review that in a second. And then in the second lesson, you learned another important issue, reported speech. I'm going to share with you again another PDF in which you have reported speech more detailed in a more detailed manner, because in this case you have to be very careful with the reported speech structure. If you remember, in the reported speech section, they uh, they talked about the changes that you need to follow in the verbs of the direct speech. Okay, for this grammatical issue, you need to understand two concepts. The first one is a direct speech, and the second one is reported speech. Direct speech is what I'm doing right now, for example, saying things. If my mother said, for example, I'm tired, that's direct speech. She said, I'm tired. That's a direct speech. But if I want, if I want to transform that sentence into a reported speech, I need to follow certain patterns in the verb. My mother said she was tired. So in this case, you need to be very careful because of the changes of the verbs from the direct speech to the reported speech. So I'm also going to share with you a PDF in which you have a more detailed explanation of the reported speech changes. So you can review all the factors that you need to consider in order to manage a reported speech. And then for lesson 4, you learn how to predicting listening for main ideas. In this case, just to identify the main ideas of a listening. An important, but I don't think it was. Of course, you need to pay attention to this kind of things. Okay, for example, listening for "ul," which in this case is a contraction. We need to be aware of that. In this case, I don't think that the most important thing that we need to learn is how to listening for all, but to understand something, which is that we need to be careful with contractions, not only in listening, but also in speaking, okay? Because in some cases, sometimes we just forget how to pronounce or how to understand the contractions of any kind in English. In this case, where you're working with the future contraction L, but you have to pay attention for other kind of contractions. For example, for have in imperfect tenses, I have, I've, or I had, I'd, for example, or the difference between the past perfect, I'd, I'd, I'd been able to dance, or the conditional, the present conditional. For example, I would like to dance, which is I'd like. So in this case, it is important to understand the will contraction, but I think that the main idea that you have to keep in mind is not the will contraction, but that you need to be aware of the pronunciation and the understanding of all the other contractions. And using time expressions for the writing section. So that's it. Okay, so Unit 9, Unit 10, Unit 11, and Unit 12. As I told you along the explanation, I think that in almost all the units, the most important part is not vocabulary section, but grammar section. Modals, passive voice, phrasal verbs, and second conditional, and in this case, reported speech, okay, which is a kind of difficult topic in some cases. Okay, until this point, any question, Junwen? Because you are the only one here. Nope. Okay. We're not gonna do exactly an activity because you are the only one in the class. So let's make a review of the things that you learned. I'm going to show you my notes, which are not exactly as beautiful as I like them to be, but they are useful for me because usually I only copy the vocabulary section and the grammar explanation section of each unit. So I have here all the units content. And in this case, for example, let's go for unit let me just see. Unit is this one, I think. Yes, unit 9. Okay, in this case, we have vocabulary for a college subjects. Let's do a pronunciation practice. Could you please help me with the pronunciation of these words? You know, do you have your? Can you are you able to open your microphone?
Yes. All
Okay,
the
could you help
words?
me? Yes, please. All the words.
Okay. College subjects: architecture, biology, business, chemistry, computer science, economics, education, engineering,
Engineering.
engineering,
Uh-huh.
law, medicine, physics, and political science.
Political science. Thank you very much. Exactly. So we have here some college subjects: architecture, biology, business, chemistry, computer science, economics, education, engineering, law, medicine, physics, and political science. Thank you very much. In the grammar part, as I told you before, you learn how to use need to and have to. But the important thing, I think, in this case was the difference between need to, have to, and must. Do you remember what is the difference between those modals? When you use have to and when you use, for example, must.
Must is obligatory. You have to do it. You don't have option.
Mhm.
And a have, I think it's more optional.
Exactly. You have the option to don't do the activity, but you probably have we can say a weak obligation to do that kind of activity. But you also work with with don't have to do something and with mustn't do something. Do you remember what is that about? The contrast or the difference between mustn't and doesn't have to or don't have to?
I think it's the same but in negative, but I don't remember well.
Well, in this case, I think the most important issue to remember is with mustn't. You need to remember that mustn't, because it has a stronger meaning than have to. We use a mustn't for prohibitions. For example, you mustn't be in the class. You mustn't eat in the class. It means that you don't have options. It is prohibited that you are eating in the class. So you just need to avoid to do the action. I think that's the most important thing to remember about mustn't. Okay. In lesson 2, you learn this vocabulary. In this case, we're talking about. Just let me go here. We are talking about employment vocabulary. Can you help me with the reading?
Vocabulary: apply, career, contract, employer,
Contract?
contract. Okay. Fire. Oh, I
Hmm?
don't know. It's just like fire of the one that
It's the
burned
same.
your house. Okay.
It's the same, exactly.
Hire, manage, profession, retirement, and salary.
And salary, exactly. For example, in this case, we have this word, contract. In this case, again, we have that I told you before, the contrastive accent. It's not the same to say contract and to say contract. Contract is the noun, el contrato. Contract is the verb. En este caso puede ser contraer, ajá, porque contratar no es el mismo, es hire, ajá, contract. So you have to be careful with that because we have a difference between a contract and contract. In this case, because we are talking about employment vocabulary, the pronunciation of this word is contract, contrato. And we have here other two words. Could you please help me with those words?
Wage, working hours.
And working hours. Thank you, exactly. Wage and working hours. And then in the grammar section, you learn how to use can, may, and could. Do you remember anything about these models? Some differences or some specific features of each of the models? Do you remember
I
anything?
remember that can and mine, no, may,
Uh-huh.
they have a negative form, but could you can use it in negative.
Well, all of them have negative forms. But some of them have contract forms. For example, can, can't, and could, couldn't. But may doesn't have a negative contraction. We cannot say mayn't. We need to say may not. May not. But all of them have negative forms. But in this case, may doesn't have a contraction. Okay. But in terms of usage, do you remember anything about can, may, and could?
I think may was formal, but I don't remember well.
Exactly. May was formal to talk about permissions, to ask for permissions. Usually, may is for we use may in formal context, and usually can in informal context. Also, you need to remember that to ask questions for permission, we can use can and may and also could. But for answer those questions, when someone asks us for a permission to answer those questions, we only can use can and may, but not could. If someone asks you, could you borrow me your pencil? You cannot say I could borrow you my pencil. You need to say I may or I can. Okay, but we cannot use could to answer those kind of questions. Okay, thank you. Let's go with unit 10. Could you please help me with the vocabulary section?
Materials: cotton, glass, leather, no, I
Leather
leather, metal, plastic, polyester, stone, wood, and wool.
and wool. Thank you. Exactly. Cotton, glass, leather, metal, plastic, polyester, stone, wood, and wool. And as you can see, they are materials for clothes. This was the main idea. Well, glass is not for clothes. Clothes, for example, glass or plastic. Well, in some cases, we can use plastic for clothes. But in this case, I think the main idea is about. mm, materials for clothes. Okay, and in this case, you learn how to structure a simple present passive voice. Could you please tell me how to structure a sentence in the past in the simple present passive tense?
I don't remember the exact names, but I remember that the first part goes like at the end, and the end goes at the beginning, and you use the
Okay.
passive voice to make like more emphasis in in the action.
In the action, exactly. Very, very good. Excellent. Okay, in this case, probably the most difficult question is to learn the vocabulary, but you are in a very good, how can I say this? You have the general idea very clear. You need to remember in this case, again, some terms that usually are difficult to remember, but that you need to remember. The first one is the active voice, and the second one is the passive voice. Mhm. Because in this case, we need to remember that a passive voice is just a transformation of the active voice. Mhm. Also, it is probable that you can remember these structures by remembering some of the concepts that you learned to talk about a Spanish grammar structure. In this case, we have subject, which is in Spanish sujeto, verb, which is verbo in Spanish, and then you have object, which is objeto o complemento directo en español. Mhm. We need to remember that the active voice has this structure: subject, verb, and object. And this is the order of the words in the sentence. Maria eats an apple. Okay, and the focus of the active voice sentence is not the action or the object, but the subject. Who does the action? And then in the passive voice, the only thing that we have is the inversion of the order. In this case, in the first place, we have the object, then we have the verb in its passive form, and then we have the subject if we want. But in this case, for the passive voice, the subject is optional. Mhm. Because in this case, as you told, or as you said before, the focus of the passive voice is not the subject, but the action. Or more formally, the focus is on the object. An apple was eaten or is eaten by Maria. Probably also that we need to remember something very specific about the active and the passive voice. First of all, in this case, for example, in the active voice, we need to remember that we use the simple present. For example, Maria eats an apple. And in the passive voice, we use a verb to be and the past participle form of the verb. Mhm. In this case, also, we need to remember that the verb to be is in present, in simple present, and then the past participle of the verb that we are dealing with. For example, Maria eats an apple. If we transform that active sentence into a passive sentence, we need to say an apple is eaten by Maria, and then of course we can add the subject with the preposition by. Mhm. Um, an apple was eaten by Maria. I really think, or I really, yes, I really think that in these cases, in the conjugations of the verbs, we need to remember the grammatical structures because we have a lot of conjugation tenses. First of all, we need to remember the simple tenses. Then we need to remember the continuous tenses, and then we need to learn how to structure the passive voice forms of the sentences. And in this case, it's very important for us to remember the structure because it's the only way in which we can be or it can be easier for us to conjugate the verbs in the correct form of the sentence. But let's go for the other one, because if not, we're not gonna finish. Okay, then vocabulary for production and distribution. Could you please help me with the words? Just let me go first in this case. We have a lot of them. The first one, or the first group of words:
Deliver, export,
export,
okay,
export,
export,
mhm,
import, transport, ship.
ship. Okay, again, we have to be careful in this case with some of the words. Export, import, and transport. They are verbs. If we say export, import, and transport, they are nouns. Okay, that's the contrastive accent. This is a very important pronunciation issue in this case. You need to remember that it's not the same to say export, or in this case export, that to say export. Uh-huh. Depending in which syllable we put the stress, is going to be the meaning of the word. Mhm. Exactly. If we change the pronunciation, the meaning is going to change too. Or in another way, not exactly the meaning, because, for example, in this case, export and export are related, but the use of the words. For example, the export of bananas was terrible last year, for example. In this case, we have a noun. But if we say, I want to export bananas, in this case, we are using the verb. In some cases, it's about meaning, but in some cases, it's about grammatical category. It could be a noun or it could be a verb, depending on the accent of the syllable. Okay, so you have to be careful with that. Usually, in the dictionary, you have that difference in the phonetic part of the dictionary. You should have seen that question in your phonetic and phonology class, which is where to find in the dictionary these kind of issues. Uh-huh. I don't know if you saw that, but you had to learn that kind of questions. Could you please help me with the next group of words? Creating and making things.
Design, manufacture, produce,
And the last ones, sorry,
hatch, grow, and pick.
and the other ones?
Freeze, store.
And store. Okay, and another important thing that I think you need to pay attention on is that some words, for example, in this case, we know some of these words. For example, store. What is the basic meaning that we know about a store? What is the basic meaning? The first meaning that we learned, that is related with store in Spanish, for example. Tienda, exactly. This is the basic meaning. But we have other kind of meanings. For example, in the commerce context, what does store mean? Store. Keep, exactly. Guardar. Guardar mercancía, for example. Again, we have here freeze. For example, in the normal context, is related with cold. But in this case, we are talking about freezing products, for example, or freezing importations or transportations, or whatever we have in mind. We're talking about something that is not moving to any other place. Okay, so in this case, I also think it's important for us to pay attention on the meaning of the word that we already know, but that has other kind of meaning in other context. Okay, so be careful with that kind of things. Okay, I don't think we are gonna have time to review the other material. Okay, let's go with unit 11. Okay, unit. In this case, you learn how to use, if I'm not wrong, the simple present passive, which is again the same. Simple past passive is the same as in the other one. Okay, we have here the same structure. But in this case, you need to remember that for conjugated, the past, the passive, the simple past passive voice. In the first one, in the active voice, you have the simple past, and then in the second one, in the passive voice, we have the same structure: verb to be plus the past participle. But in this case, we need to conjugate the verb to be in its simple past form. If I said, for example, she ate an apple, she ate an apple, simple past, to create a simple past passive voice sentence, we need to say the apple was eaten by her. Okay, so I think that's the only thing that we need to remember about that. And let's go for the final unit, which is unit 12. Let me just find it here. Which is an important one. Phrasal verbs. We have a lot of things to say about it, but we don't have too much time here. '11, for example, we need to go to in this one. I think this is an important one. Vocabulary for phrasal verbs. Get over. Usually, when we have a specific meaning that we don't manage right now, I think it's a good idea for you to also copy the meaning of the word. Get over, to accept an unpleasant fact or situation after dealing with it for a while. Set up, to start a company or organization. Work out, to be successful for develop in a particular way. And you have to be very careful again here, because in some cases we have two meanings for a phrasal verb. You also know another meaning for workout. Do you remember the meaning of workout? The other workout? In this case, we have here to be successful or develop in a particular way, but we have another meaning for workout. For example, if I say I was working out at the gym, it's like exercise in the gym, for example. Give up, you have here two meanings for give up. Give up to stop doing something before you have completed it, or you also can use give up to stop doing or to stop having something. So give up is another good example in which we have two meanings for the same phrasal verb. This is a very important issue in this unit. Okay, if you can focus on these phrasal verbs, I think it would be a very good strategy for you, because in this case you are going to start paying attention on the structure for the phrasal verbs. Okay, let's finish here, because if not, we're not gonna we don't have time to go for the other topics in the next units. Okay, let's go here. Okay. Okay, next week activities. We don't have a next week. Okay, these activities must be delivered for tomorrow. But as I told to my students in my previous class, in reality, in the Blackboard platform, is if you go to the Blackboard platform, you are gonna find out that the real or the activities are configured to be delivered until Sunday 15th. So you have until Sunday at midnight to deliver all the activities. But as I told you before, don't don't let all the activities to the end of the week, because you are not gonna have time to deliver all the activities. But you need to remember that even if officially the due date for the activities is tomorrow, you have until Sunday to deliver all the things that you have missed until this point. Okay, so for next week, which is in reality this week on Sunday, you need to deliver Unit 11 and Unit 12, pushing yourself and life's little lessons. Remember again that for each of these units, you have two activities. The general activity, which is the general content, student's course for Unit 11 and a student's course for Unit 12. And then you have to deliver the progress test for each of the units. Unit 11 progress test and Unit 12 progress test. Each of these activities is worth a point, half a point. Okay, so at the end of this week you need to gain 2 points of the 10 possible points that you can have for all the course. These are our last 2 units. So for this point, you should gain 10 points for the final score. Okay, so 4 activities, 2 units, and 2 more points. Again, even when the official due date is tomorrow, remember that you have until Sunday to deliver all the units, because all the units are opened to complete them until Sunday. So please be careful with that. You have 3 days. You still have 3 days. So I think you have enough time to complete all the activities that you have missed until this point. Okay. Questions about the things that we need to deliver? Have you already finished all the units, Union, or not? Are you there? Okay, so please hurry up. You have 3 days, but also remember that it is probable that a Sunday is the last opportunity to send all the homework. Okay, because if you don't deliver on Sunday, I don't know if coordination is going to give us another instruction, because usually they don't. But if they do, okay, probably you will have a couple of days more. But if not, Sunday is the last day that you have to deliver all the activities that you have missed until now. Okay, so be careful with that and hurry up in these 3 days left. Okay, any questions about the activities or anything? No questions? Well, the last thing, but not for that less important, is the questionnaire for students. Okay, so I ask you to answer the opinión estudiantil, because it's important for us. It is probable again that you have until next week to complete this questionnaire, but if you have time today or or I don't know, tomorrow, whichever day you want, but of course before the due date, please answer the questionnaire for students, because it's important for us. It's for us to improve our service, also to see if we are doing a good job. And that's it. Okay, and also in this point I really want all of you, even if you are not here, for being here in this class. I really hope that you have learned something from me. As I told you before, it is difficult for us as Spanish speakers to be in an English high level all the time, because usually we're speaking in Spanish all the time. For example, just before this class, I was speaking in Spanish a lot. So for us, it's difficult to gain the fluency or the correctness that we would like to have during the class. But we really make an effort for you to learn the most possible things that you can relating to English language. Okay, so I really hope that you have learned something. As I told you before, also Cambridge platform is a very good tool, probably not for learning a lot of English, but for practicing the English that you need to learn in order to improve yourself by your own learning strategies. Because remember that I told you at the beginning of the course that you need to remember that this course is not for you to gain the B1 level, but to give you the strategies that you can use in order to learn English by yourself. Because as we are in an online major, the main weight in your learning process is on yourself. Okay, you need to use the strategies that you think are useful for you to improve your English skills, speaking, vocabulary, writing, reading, whatever you want to improve in relation with your English abilities. It is all up on you. Okay, so I don't know if you have any comments. In this case, just genuine comments or anything to say about the course. No? Okay, so then we can finish today. Thank you very much. As I told you before, be careful and be attentive on Monday, because on Monday I'm gonna publish the post about the session for the review of the final scores. So be aware of that. If you have any doubt, or if any doubt comes during that week, we're gonna try to, or we're gonna try to solve them in that session. So be aware, be careful with that. The session is going to be on Thursday. So that's it. Okay. If you don't have any other question or any other comment, you can send a message through Blackboard or through the institutional account, and then we will see on there any question or any doubt that rises during the week. Okay. So see you then. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.